two-timer.
Oh yeah.
Back again for Cinema Life and everything. How are you doing today, mate? All right?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, yourself?
Yeah, good, thanks. I was just going to say, probably by the time that viewers and listeners listen to this, it's going to be post-Christmas, but this is just pre-Christmas. So we're
Yeah.
both just getting ready for the festive spirit to begin, not long at all now. So, but beforehand, we both, I was putting some stuff up online on the old Instagram and we got chatting again, and you came up with three excellent films. But before we go into them, just in case this is anyone's first time we've known you, Tom, why don't you just give you a little sort of thing about yourself, what you're into, how's the film coming on, Baby in the Basket and stuff, and yeah, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, so I'm a screenwriter, occasional film journalist as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, completely obsessed with film, writing films, writing about films.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so this last year, well, probably going back to 2022, sort of middle of
Mhm.
2022, I started co-producing a film of my own.
Yes.
Because I'd been writing for hire mostly, and then I just decided, well, I want to have a bit more control over what I do and what we put out. So yeah, The Baby in the Basket, a gothic horror, shot and set in Scotland,
Amazing.
and we're in post-production now. Had a few disasters along the way. There was a storm up in Scotland while we were filming, so we lost a day of filming.
Oh,
But yeah, we've done our reshoots, we've done our pickups, and yeah, touch wood, it's all good.
brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
Exciting times then. Well, you'll have to keep us informed, and I'll keep plugging you on the channel and stuff as well, mate. But well done. And like everyone, so what did you think the biggest step for you is? Because so many people say they're going to do things, but the actual momentum and the will to carry it forward. What was your sort of tipping point? It was like, no, I have to make this. I have to bring this into being. And why gothic horror?
I think it was I get sort of a little bit limited, I guess, where if people are hiring me, it's sort of distributors or sometimes production companies working via distributors.
Hmm.
And a lot of it can become from the same pool, or it can be quite limited. So it's all like creature features or disaster films. Get the occasional action film thrown in there as well, which I don't mind doing. But I was getting to the point where I felt like I'd done so many kind of gigs for hire that I'd almost crossed off every kind of film,
Right.
um, without necessarily doing something a little bit different, or that I felt I could sort of sneak in a bit more, subtext and a few more layers. So yeah, it came about from there. Working with a friend of mine, Nathan Shepker, as well. So he's got similar tastes in films to me. So often it will come like, shall we do a film like this, or should we do like a Get Carter, or should we do a gothic horror? And it kind of just goes from there. And then we steamrolled on from there. But I think
Brilliant.
it's also, sometimes you can, as a screenwriter, for example, you can sort of hand off a script and then it's in the kind of like the lap of the gods then. And sometimes you're happy with how it turns out, sometimes not quite so much. But
Hmm.
I think producing myself and working with someone like Nathan, who I know very well, and I kind of know what he will deliver, then you kind of feel a bit more assurance that you're going to do something that's maybe, well, hopefully special.
Yeah.
That's the big hope anyway, to do something that maybe a bit better than kind of what I've had so far.
It's sort of like being the captain of your own destiny, having a bit more agency and stuff like that as well in what you do. So
Yeah,
like it stands or falls by you, as opposed to you could have put your best effort forward, but it gets passed through so many others' hands that you don't really get the final say. It's not your true vision.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just taking control, and then if it doesn't come out quite so good, it's just I still, I can get the blame. So
Well, it's actually interesting as
hopefully,
well.
yeah.
But no, but saying about the whole True Vision thing, I didn't plan this as a segue, but three of your especially your three films you've chosen today, I do think they show a completeness of vision. Like I don't think it's part any
Yeah,
of these three films from the time they were being made, or indeed the size of the budget. They've had to pass through too many other sort of studio executives or producers, so you're not getting a lot of I think that's something that I've really sort of linked into a lot recently when I'm watching film, that if I feel like it's had lots of rewrites or been passed through lots of different editors, then suddenly that it becomes more of a patchwork quilt rather than a unique joined up approach.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big thing, really. And yeah, like you say, the three films that I've chosen have kind of got that in it. So that was
Mm,
partly the reason we went kind of the crowdfunding route as well. I mean,
yes.
we would have had the option maybe to kind of tie up with a distributor from the beginning, but their idea of perhaps what a non-horror should be would be different to what our idea is.
Mm,
Um, yeah, so I mean, they might be right, you know, what is more commercial and what will sell more, but yeah, we were quite keen to do something that had a, you know, a bit more depth to it, and maybe was more built on atmosphere and, you know, tension rather than just sort of quick
jump
thrills,
scares.
or
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
jump scares, or just kind of like doing a an imitation of, you know, like The Conjuring or The Nun
No,
and things like that.
yeah. I was so, and that's an interesting one for me as well. Do you feel like when you're like making something as well and bringing something forward, that a lot of the classics now, so to speak, on time of release tend to bomb, but it's like or like some of the experimental cinema of the 70s as well, like really like languished for a long while, but then it suddenly picks up steam. It almost becomes like a forgotten classic. So I don't know, like having that, it still happens because I also saw
Yeah,
Saltburn a couple of weeks ago, and one of the films we're going to talk about today. So this cinema is still made, but like having that ability and I guess the funds to still be able to go out there and just make those slightly weird films, off kilter films. But you know, it's quite scary to think if everything becomes just about budget. Are people's voices being silenced because they just simply can't get the funding to make the films they want to make, or make the art they want to make? Actually,
yeah, it's really difficult at the moment. I think partly, you know, the 70s, for example, obviously was quite an adventurous time in cinema,
mm,
particularly American. Um, and yeah, you had all these kind of maverick filmmakers doing kind of what they wanted. To an extent, a lot of the times they would be just given the money and lots sort of left to it.
yes,
And you know, studios seemed more intent on kind of doing that. Obviously, things sort of changed in the blockbuster generation, and progressively, kind of, it's become more about, you know, products rather
yeah,
than maybe, you know, creating a piece of art. But I think that's the danger at the moment, is we're in the content age, and you know,
mm,
things could become even more disposable. But I think, yeah, I mean, there's still, you know, a few filmmakers that are get that chance to do something a little bit different, a bit, you know, off kilter, and hopefully that will be the kind of way forward. I think, you know, if you look at A24, for example, they're
yes,
still doing quite well. There's a bit of a kind of, you know, a niche audience that's growing kind of every year, really, with that, and they're still doing things that are, you know, very different. So if they continue to have a bit of success, people will kind of buy into that. At the
yeah,
same time, they're kind of looking at the, you know, the comic book genre, and it seems to be on some kind of decline at the moment. Whether that's like a long term thing, I don't know, but it does seem like perhaps audiences are now, they want to be a bit more challenged. You've got to
yeah.
really grab someone's attention and make them think about something, make them think about something after the film is finished as well. Not sort of let, you know, you watch something and it just sort of disappears into the ether, you know, 10 minutes later. So yeah, that's kind of my goal when I'm producing myself, is to do something that hopefully will kind of inspire people to come back to it, even if they think, "What the hell was that?" the first time. Um, I mean, there's been a few films, even some of the ones. Well, one of the ones I'm going to talk about today, I kind of was a little bit indifferent at first, but you know, second time I sort of thought, "Oh," and then
Yeah.
third, fourth, and it kind of sort of slowly grabs you. So I kind of like that stealth cinema, I call it. It's just sneaks up on you.
I've
Um,
yeah, I've become more aware of, like, especially there was a film, that one of the most recent examples, You Were Never Really Here, with Joaquin Phoenix, made by Lynn
yeah,
Ramsey, and I watched it and was like, okay, and then but there's so much imagery in it. Actually, one of the images is still stuck to my wall over here, and I think that's it now. Something like you say, something sticks with you. Like you're not sure if you're completely enamored by it, but then there's something in it that makes you want to watch it again, or just check some of it out, or there's images or a certain scene that doesn't leave you, and then you want to watch it again and watch it again. I think that's good. It doesn't always have to be clearly laid out. The stealth cinema quote is a good one. I like that. So
I'm
should we
gonna copyright
yeah,
that.
go for it. It's a book there, but or a
Yeah.
podcast. But yeah, let's have a chat about your free films and what are your free films you've selected today, then, mate.
Okay, so I'll go in chronological order. So first one is Taxi Driver,
Nice.
Martin Scorsese. Second one is WITHNAIL and I,
Great.
student staple. And then the third one, a bit more recent from last year, is AFTERSUN.
Yeah, this is the one that got us
Yeah.
both chatting again, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah.
Because I was just like, yeah. So which one should we start with? I mean, it's a hell of a choice. I'm going to resist doing Are You Talking to Me? But go on, this.
Yeah, start with Taxi Driver.
Start with Taxi Driver. Brilliant choice, Travis Bickle. Right. So yeah, I enjoyed watching this again. It's funny with De Niro. I've seen so much of him, but like he always still surprises when you sit down and watch one of his performances again, just how like crazy it was. But anyway, it's not up to me to tell you why Taxi Driver. Go on.
I think this was like a really defining moment in my cinema viewing, really. I think I said a little bit similar when I mentioned Blade Runner in our first show, that I'd kind of grown up watching, Sly, Arnie. So I'd been watching kind of adult movies, but they weren't like, I guess, what you'd call, hugely layered or anything like that, or, with deeper themes. But yeah, Taxi Driver was one of the first really kind of dark pieces of cinema that I'd watched. So probably, I don't know, maybe 11, 12, something like that. But,
Wow.
Even like from the first viewing, I was kind of really taken aback by it. I just think I found it really compelling. And obviously, part of it, I think, was you kind of hear it has a bit of a reputation. It's probably when I was growing up, when I ended up watching it, the reputation was probably a bit fiercer than what it is now. It's probably quite tame by today's standards, but yeah, sort of, early to mid 90s when I probably first saw it, it probably still had a bit of a reputation for having this kind of edge and being quite, violent. And so that's probably what drew me to it. But then, what has kept me going back to it again and again is that just the story itself and the character. It's just, yeah, incredible, I think.
It's just, I think the thing that gets me so much about it on watching it again as well was just how it creates that character that's at first you're sort of in with him and you sort of like understanding him, and then it goes on, and it never gives you that point of like you should stop liking him now, but then you just realize as an unreliable narrator, there's probably none more unreliable than him, and you just realize how, and even the last scene is so open to interpretation that this man that you think is almost painted as an anti-hero just becomes this like recalcitrant, just absolutely horror of a, and it's just like I say, the sort of critiques it makes of masculinity, society, law and order, and then just how it just displays it all for you, but without ever making you feel any which way. It's just it is a masterpiece, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's just got such a really unromantic view of New York as well.
Yes.
Whereas, atypically maybe up until like a decade prior is all glitz and glamour, and you'd always see the nice parts of it rather than the underbelly. And I always found it quite interesting. There's like this push-pull with like the visuals, and it's almost dreamlike at times, and you got the music.
Yeah.
All of it's this kind of slow jazz that's quite atmospheric and almost melodic at times, and then all of a sudden it will shift into these kind of like quite, I guess, oppressive booms and tones that are a little bit off kind of tune. So I just think it's like Scorsese, it's at a point where he's really kind of young, vibrant, and he's really kind of pushing, experimenting and doing all these different things and really kind of letting loose. and it all still comes together brilliantly. Yeah, I mean, in terms of De Niro as well, it's still my favorite performance of his, because
Yeah.
it's still like, I think it's his most introverted performance or character, where so much of what, you know, he puts across on screen is without words, and it's, you know, visuals. Even if he's sort of saying something over the narration, you know, it can
Yes.
be, yeah, it can sort of conflict with what you're actually seeing on screen sometimes. um yeah, I think it's just I was quite fortunate that a couple of years ago they re-released it at the cinema, so
Oh, I missed out on
I love
that.
going back. So, you know, I went back, watched it again at the cinema, and it's like a whole new experience, because when you're hearing the, you know, the score as well, in, you know, full on cinema sound, and, you know,
Yeah.
the visuals, it just kind of blows you away. And even like the audience, some of the younger audience there, what probably watching it for the first time, you can kind of see it kind of just really kind of hits you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's so visceral, and one of the things that I was struck by the recent viewing of it again as well was it really does play with mirrors, and obviously the rear view mirror, him talking himself into mirror, but mirrors and reflections, and also what the role of the audience is in this film as well, because it forces you to take a side, it forces you to engage, and like I say, for like quite a big, well-known film, it's very experimental. The simple fact that Scorsese
yeah.
himself shows up in a film as well in a masterful cameo, like terrifying
That is
cameo as
such a
well.
good cameo as well.
Yeah,
He's just like, he's really intense in it as well.
it was amazing because I saw Killers of the Flower Moon a little while ago, and Scorsese shows up in that as well. And it's interesting seeing how he is now as the old man and how De
Yeah.
Niro is in that film as well. And then just thinking back to Taxi Driver with that Scorsese sitting on the back seat and De Niro in the driver's seat listening to him. And it's like, wow, like the transition of their life and what, you know, their journey as well. Incredible.
It is, it's amazing. I think it's just what, you know, all the things that he did in the film, Scorsese, like, you know, there's that shot where De Niro's on the phone, he's trying to sort of have a conversation with Sybil Shepherd or
Yes.
whatever. And then the camera just sort of shifts away, like you're not supposed to watch that conversation, kind of focuses on an empty corridor.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's the sort of thing that, you know, at film school they tell you, what the hell are you doing? You know, is the cameraman falling asleep or something? You know, so
It's
yeah,
just
no,
the thing that I think Scorsese had in that as well is just like you obviously can get the impression that he's let that camera just roll and then he's got it. That's another big thing for me as well. Editing, time to edit.
yeah,
Um, Back in the 70s, that you know, you had time to film, then you had so many months to edit before it was like you know, it was released when it was ready, basically. Whereas now everything is so temp-holed and it has to be released on this date. And I think there's something once you've got the ingredients of the film, it has to be allowed to marinate and cook. And you can say these long takes are obviously edited down, especially, you know, the infamous Are You Talking to Me scene. How much footage was probably actually recorded and how much they edited it down just to get the points of De Niro's performance they needed. So he could feel free. So it wasn't, you know, action cut, action cut. But at the same time, that it wasn't overblown and too long and self-indulgent.
I think so, yeah. And I think, you know, even like, you know, obviously back then when they would be doing it the old sort of old fashioned way of like literally cutting the film and piecing
Mm,
it back together, I think there's such a meticulous thing about that, and, you know, time consuming and very careful. I think nowadays, you know, if you've got editing software, it can almost be a case of you're almost over editing, because you've got so many things you can do, so many drop downs, so many options, that people kind of think, oh, I can do this, I can do this, and you're almost overdoing it and becoming a little bit intrusive sometimes. So I think,
yeah.
yeah, just like the old school way of doing it. But even then, I think, you know, there's some editing tricks in there that, you know, particularly in the end sort of shootout, there's
Oh,
you know, there's a few sort of freeze frames and drop frames, and, you know, they crank up the camera speed at a couple of points. So, you know, they were still, you know, happy to riff a little bit, almost jazz like the score.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And do you find that? I mean, we'll get on to With Now because it obviously completely different films, but those two especially. Actually, After Sun has it as well quite a lot. Just that the freedom of movement, and it's not set on, because I think, you know, superhero movies and stuff, we mentioned comic book films get a bad rap at the moment, but I don't really think it's superhero as so much. There is, even though they're hiring different directors, they're edited in and filmed and scripted in such a way that it's become very formulaic. And I think rather than just what's going on in the film or the characters in the film, it's more that people are rebelling against just this, like you said it perfectly early on, it's almost like a mental McDonald's. This just, you're going to go in, it's going to last 2.5 hours because that's what an epic film is these days. There's going to be these shots used again and again. You're going to introduce the characters like this. It'll be lots of 80s music because we can get it cheaper, and also it's
Yeah,
nostalgia. And there's going to be comedy and sorry, probably something quite vicious happening in the same scene as well. And people are just trying to rebel against that. They just want a story told in a different way.
exactly. Yeah. So I think, you know, that is why A24 seems to be even, I don't know if it's a dangerous thing, it becoming a bit mainstream because they might rest on their
Yeah,
laurels a bit. But I think they've had a really good sort of 18 months, I think, A24. So
they've been
touch
doing some
wood,
great.
they're sticking with their morals and their kind of way of doing things. But we need kind of more like that, I think. You know, I kind of operate a lot in the indie world, you know, very low budget horror films and things like that.
Mm,
I always kind of, I've spoken to people about it. I always wonder why people opt to do kind of really low budget, you know, sort of throwaway horrors, I guess, rather than maybe trying to do a lower level, you know, A24 and trying to,
yeah.
have that indie mentality and maybe a little bit more artistic. So there probably would be a gap in the market there, I think, because audiences do seem willing to kind of go with the flow of something a little bit different or that's challenging, maybe.
I guess I don't know why because the funny thing is I'm quite fascinated by horror as well. I mean, my two first adult films I watched were horror films, and I think there's almost, I mean, we have to talk about it. At the end of the day, there is a return. That it has to be I wish it wasn't, but there is a
Yeah,
return on the investment sometimes. Especially now, weirdly, there's so many YouTube channels and critics that are like they take it on board as well. Like, oh, this new comic book film is going to bomb. It's going to bomb, and it's like, but what's the film? What's the film like? I don't, like
yeah,
money wise, some of the Fight Club bombed on its release. One of my favorite films, but just having this idea of like, I know that horror films that, especially this happened with Blumhouse quite a lot, they could invest this much and it would get this much of a return. So they knew they were never going to lose money in it. So that helped
yeah.
them get first time or very young directors or very new directors in, because they knew, okay, because it's got a Blumhouse stamp on it now, no matter what, it will get this much of a return. So it's sort of like almost betting, not betting small, but betting a reasonable and always expecting that same rate of return.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's difficult. I know that at the moment UK film industry is quite tough, particularly sort
Mm,
of the indie level. Um, it's just people aren't that quick to sort of invest money at the moment, so they want the absolute surest bet you can give them.
yeah.
It isn't necessarily always right, but they just want to make sure that they're going to get their money back.
It's funny though, to your point though, Rose Glass, who released Saint Maud, which was
Yeah.
like, Christ, I hope someone selects that one day. A spectacular horror film.
I
But
mean, that was partly inspiration for The Baby in the Basket.
oh,
As
there
one of
we
the
go.
films yeah.
That's,
So thank you, Rose.
we didn't plan that. We didn't, but like her new one now, I think it's
Yeah,
called She Wants Revenge, with Kirsten Stewart. I saw the trailer to that the other day. A24 funded, and I'm like,
yeah.
oh, okay, so she did the horror in the first one. She's got some crazy camera effects and stuff, but now this one's less horror, it's more thriller, but you can still see, okay, that proved it in that, and now we can take it over to this. So I don't know, maybe the horror's the way that directors get to cut their teeth a little bit now and stuff as well.
I think so, yeah. But I mean, obviously, she had a little bit of ambiguity,
Yes,
did something that kind of challenged you a bit. So yeah, and audiences responded to it. So it seems to have a cult following,
I
which
might
I think will get bigger as the years go on.
This is it. And you
Yeah,
know what? Maybe because horror is such a good one that makes you feel like we talk about, I have to go back to that. When you're like, when it's something so like as a motive as like not a jump scare, but something that can make you feel uneasy or sick. It's like, seeing a car crash or something, it tends to stick with you. So maybe there's that thing about horror and people go into horror because they not as an ego thing, but they want to be remembered because then, like you say, you get that
yeah.
cult following, and then when you got the cult following, then they invest in you more. I guess you're given more opportunities to make other films and stuff as well.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah, for sure. I think it's a good place to start. Obviously, it's more budget friendly than trying to do a big old action film. Um, yeah, I mean, I do like horror, but I always like, something which is, more atmosphere built and, taps into different kind of, rather than just, sort of jump scares or,
I can't.
you know, creatures and that. I do like something that's got a bit, a bit different to it, like The Thing. It's got
Oh,
all the creature stuff, all the effects, but, that's built on pure paranoia and, tension and
fear of the other.
atmosphere. Just,
You mentioned it earlier on subtext, right? So
yeah,
at the very base level, it's someone, I don't know, someone running around with a knife, but then it is, what happens when you go down those stairs? What happens, it can be a commentary on promiscuity, it can be a commentary on, oh, our street's safe. There's so many avenues you can go down. It doesn't just, like I say, my
yeah,
worst thing is when it's a or like a jump scare, or it's just gratuitous back in the early late 90s when it was just, or early 2000s when it's just becoming about torture porn. Completely switched me
yeah.
off. It's more the uneasiness, folk horror, the fear of what could happen rather than what you're showing happening. I think just is so much more valuable and so much more affecting. But I mean, really, in a way, you can say Taxi Driver. There's a lot of horror in it. It's a man losing his mind,
Yeah,
and
yeah, for sure.
also what you're actually. Some of the cuts are very horrific. There's a hell of a lot spoilers. There's a hell of a lot of blood in it at one point as well.
Yeah,
So it really we could have a whole discussion of what is horror. I mean, we've got the obvious marketed horror of the jump scares and stuff, but then Travis Bickle's story is truly horrific.
that is it. Yeah, I mean, it's a very kind of horrific view of the city he lives in, the society at the time, um, and it's just this guy trying to exist and kind of cope with these deep rooted feelings and this feeling that's bubbling under, and he
Yeah.
can't really put it into words. I mean, I think one of my favorite scenes is the one with him and the wizard, played by Peter Boyle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just outside the taxi cafe where they sort of hang out. They're stood in front of a red neon sign, which colors the frame red, which is very kind of significant
Yeah.
as always in cinema. But it's just this is like could be a pivotal moment for a character where he's talking about what is affecting him, his problems, what he's feeling. This is a confessional kind of thing,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really work. He's trying to sort of put it into words. He can't really explain it. The other guy doesn't really know what he's talking about, so he gives sort of like some token advice.
Yeah.
And you know, Travis Bickle's like, that's got to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
De Niro is like his whole like,
Yeah,
oh, he's so in it, like scary stuff.
yeah, but
Listen,
yeah,
mate. Sorry, go on.
but I mean the performance there,
Yeah.
so much inside, and you can feel all that turmoil inside. It's just amazing.
How it's all twisted up, and how like his responses never or his even his questions never really matched the response. He's truly an outsider, mentally and physically as well. Everything in
Yeah,
his body, the way he's all twisted up and stuff as well. His sense of trying to control his body and being so ordered and but just everything is out. Everything's going out of control. The wheels are well and truly falling off. Listen, mate, I'm just gonna hang up and then I'm gonna call you back in and we can do the other two. All right. So it's
yeah,
just gonna save. So give me about 3-4 minutes and then I'll send you out another invite. All right.
Yeah, no worries, mate. See
Then so let's crack on. So we've done we got through Taxi Driver. So where would you like to go to next? With Now and I or After Sun?
I think I'll go with Nell and I.
Okay,
I'll
brilliant.
stick with chronology.
Yeah, fair play, fair play. So an amazing, unbelievably quotable film. Why
Yeah.
With Now and I?
I think it's one of those things where it goes back to when I was at uni and I was studying film.
Yeah.
Even I was, studying English as well at the same time. And it's just like this whole student thing, particularly around about that time. I think like they used to say that about a decade after it came out, because it didn't do that well initially. It kind
Mm,
of got slowly discovered on video, and then sort of grew this cult following, particularly of students.
yeah.
So, at uni, all I sort of heard was the big film that people sort of said you had to watch was With Nail and I. And they sort of kept at me, and I like to willfully go against what people ask me to do. So um, I kind of didn't really go to it, but then I was working at a Sainsbury's, and I used to have to do like putting inserts in the Sunday papers
Right,
because they don't
okay.
come ready packed. Some poor soul has to sort of put
Oh,
everyone individually in. Anyway, one of them was a free copy of With Nell and I.
nice on
Um,
DVD.
so yeah, I bought it, watched it, and I thought that was quite funny, but I don't quite see the obsessive nature about it.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, I went back to it a couple of years later because I saw it cheap on DVD then. So I got a proper DVD copy, went back and watched it, and I started to sort of I started to tune into it basically because it's such an odd film. It's
Yeah.
one of these films, I think, like we were saying earlier, that some films it feels like they're very much, a perfect vision of what the filmmaker wanted.
100%. Yeah.
But at the same time, it feels like something like I almost feel like, would anyone make it today? I don't know if anyone would kind of do that. You know,
I would be able to as well. Like if you try
yeah.
to elevator pitch that, what are you going to say? It's a very
You
unique
know,
film.
couple of out of work actors, they just go on holiday, then they come back, and there's a few eventful moments in it.
That's it.
And
Yeah.
it's not a film that's, it's not a jokey film. It's got, the odd kind of gag line in there, and it's got the odd bit of physical humor. But the mix of humor is quite strange, and you almost have to kind of, like I say, tune into it. There's a kind of, there's strangeness at times, but then you kind of get the fact that, when someone's going on about his thumbs being weird and it's a bit odd, it's because he's, he's on a come down from being on drugs. So yeah,
I always just, I don't know
yeah,
why, but the one that always sits in my head is at the very beginning when he's like, "You bastard, where did you get soup from?" And he went, "It's coffee," and he's just sitting there because he's so cold. He's just eating coffee with a spoon out of a
yeah,
bowl. It's just like Christ, but like it's not really played for laughs. Like they are that poor, they are suffering that much, and yeah,
yeah,
just an incredible film. I only heard about it because I read Richard E. Grant's autobiography many years ago now, and he mentions it, and that was the first I'd heard of it. And I went, this, even he in his autobiography says this film is like crazy. So I
yeah,
watched it, and I was just like, man, this is just strange. Like you say, you feel almost um bad for laughing at some of their predicaments because it is just like it's quite well,
yeah.
it's very bleak, but just incredible film.
Yeah, it's just this strange mix. There's, all these bleak moments. They go to like a bleak part of
Is it
I think
Wales,
it's
isn't it?
Penrith.
Yeah,
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 I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
remember where exactly I don't think they actually filmed it there, but they filmed, somewhere that looks suitably
Yeah.
kind of, bleak in the worst possible time of year by the look of it. Wintry grey days, very, wet mud. And you know, you've got that, you've got some farcical moments, you've got really sort of moments where you shouldn't be laughing, but it just comes across as quite amusing in the film with, Uncle Monty and
Oh, Uncle Monty. And you think about you saying, could that get made now and stuff like
yeah,
the whole of that scene with Uncle Monty
yeah,
coming on to it's like but it
And it's
works.
just the way that he sort of appears in, out of the dark. The guy, eye turns a light on. He's there. He's got some blush on,
Yeah.
eye makeup.
Richard Griffiths.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's just like there's again. I think weirdly, I'm never going to say this again, but similar to Taxi Driver, there's no judgment of any of the characters, and it's not that the humor isn't forced. It's just this is how you are joining them on this journey, on this
yeah,
adventure, on this life story. But we're not going to tell you how to feel. I love that lack of manipulation of the viewer. I mean, sometimes it's called for in a film, but just this is what's happening, and it's up to you on how you react to it.
yeah. I mean, it just very distinctly sets a time and a place, and what they're going through. You're in this kind of pivotal moment, and I think one thing I like about the film is it's set during a period of time where there's a big transition in society,
Yeah.
and it's a film about a transition. These two kind of long-term friends that are kind of about to be pulled apart, basically. So yeah, it's got these interesting, layers of subtext in the film as well. And I just think, I don't know how he's done it. It's one of those things you can't really explain, but I think Colin Farrell had a really good point. He said that the film, there's not a wasted word in the film.
No.
um and it's almost like every line is quotable in the film. I think I'm on a Facebook group that it's about never ending quoting of WITHNAIL, and I even like relating to random pictures. You'll just attach a WITHNAIL quote to it, and it just goes on and on. People are picking up the most kind of
Vague.
random quotes that it
Yeah.
can just be one random line that people might not necessarily remember. Then they think, oh, and it just becomes inherently more funny.
Well, it's actually as soon as you said you'd selected it as one of your films and you sent me the message on Instagram, I was just like, if you hit me, it's murder. And it's straight away, like
Yeah,
it's weird, like how it all lodges in there as well so quickly. You watch it the first time, and it was just, but it's not. It's like not like a badum. It's so. Yeah, it's strange. But again, we talk about that
yeah,
uniqueness of vision that the script and the director was one and the same. Probably had control of the edit, so he really did hone in exactly on what he needed to do and what he wanted to say, and make it again not rush through the edit as well, so it could be drum tight and exactly what he wanted to see.
yeah, exactly. And I think there was a lot of it is based on his own life as well. So there's an authenticity there about some of the characters. So there was a real kind of WITHNAIL, quite similar. I'm sorry he's been dialed up slightly for the big screen.
I would hope so.
Yeah. But I mean, you got these characters, they're almost, like particularly WITHNAIL and Danny and then Uncle Monty, they're almost like caricaturesque. But
Yes.
there's always this moment, particularly with WITHNAIL and Uncle Monty, where it pulls it back to kind of like a reality, and there's always some melancholic moment for the characters. There's the moment where it kind of grounds them again, and then you start to feel sorry for them.
Yes.
And I just always found, because I think one of the things that really stuck with me from the first viewing, even though I wasn't, because I was expecting more of like a, people bill it as like the funniest comedy ever and all this. And
Yeah.
I was expecting like gags firing off, but it's not, like an Anchorman sort of thing, or
No, not
like
at
that.
all. No.
But it's like the end. It's one thing that always sticks with people is the final, the end with the monologue. And the
I still
wistful
watch it all the
music.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's still one of my favorite pieces of cinema of all time. Richard E. Grant is just absolute.
Yeah.
Did you hear about the alternate version? What originally it was going to be?
I think I did. I can't remember it off
With
the
the
top of my head.
so same monologue, same deal, but
Yeah.
Richard E. Grant brought the shot, or WITHNAIL brought the
Oh
shotgun
yeah, yeah,
back with him.
yeah,
Does the whole monologue, puts red wine in both barrels, goes chin chin as he drinks from them. You just hear bang, and I'm just like,
yeah.
Christ, I'm sort of glad they didn't go with that. I don't think they needed
I
to
don't
go
think I'd
that
be able to
far. Yeah.
handle that.
No, it was bleak enough. Like, oh,
Yeah,
but I guess it's very final because there was always that call. I think maybe that was. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the director's name, but I think he was always.
Bruce Robinson.
That's it. He was always,
Yeah,
because I remember How to Get Ahead in Advertising as well. But I think he was always aware that they were going to want to make number two. See what happened to these characters, and he was like, resolutely no. That's all the story you get from them. That's all you need to know. That's all I needed to say.
Yeah. And I just think, this the performances, particularly the three central leads, are just fantastic.
They're
They
impeccable.
really, they really bring those characters to life. So you're taking them on this journey that's, on paper doesn't look like much, just going off to a wet weekend somewhere and then coming back. But the journey itself just feels so distinct, even when not a lot's happening. They just hang around in the pub, or they hang around back at the cottage.
Yeah.
Uncle Monty comes, they just sit and play cards. But it's just painting such a vivid picture of these characters in that moment.
I think reading Richard's E. Grant's autobiography as well, and you realise the amount of time they had to rehearse and really involve themselves in the script, and I think that really shows. Maybe that's something else that's done less of now as well.
Yeah.
How much time the actor and the director get a chance to collaborate and immerse. So the raw materials are good enough for that edit and stuff as well. I think a lot of it, so much for me anyway, it's not even maybe the budget, it's just time, or having the budget to have the time to do it correctly. From the script writing to have, and you said the perfect word as well, authenticity. Does the actor have enough time to do justice to a perfect script and make it as authentic as possible? And then is the edit allowed long enough to the film to come through as authentic as the director intended as well, and the script writer?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I think and the film has got so much texture to it as well, just in terms of the locations and the production design. It just there's so much detail in it. It's so rich, and I think that was another thing I really picked up on when I kind of shifted up to HD, and I suddenly thought, oh man, this film actually looks really good as well.
Wow. It hangs on. I've got to watch the HD version.
Oh, I'd recommend it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's because particularly when you've got those, the shots of them walking across the country and things like that. You've got the melancholic music going, or some of the soundtrack. Again, the soundtrack I really like as well.
Phenomenal. Yeah,
there's a bit of a, it's an eclectic mix, but there's a couple of Hendrix bangers in there as well. Yeah, so subsequently from like the second viewing onward, it kind of grew on me, grew into becoming one of my favorite films.
Oh, mate. Well, yeah, it's incredible. Do you have a favorite scene? This is tough though.
Oh,
no, you don't have to. So I have had the answer before, all of it, and on that film, I think especially as well, because you mentioned it already. It all latches together so well to say this one scene is my favorite scene. It sort of does a disservice to how well the whole film latches together.
I think so. There's not like a moment where some films, even in like the best films, you might think, oh, there's the scene where I'm going to skip out to the toilet. I don't mind that. Yeah, but I just get transfixed and just watch it straight through.
Yeah.
Whenever I decide to put it back on, it's one of those, like, everyone I think has, a pick me up film or pick me up films. If you're feeling a bit down, or you want to watch something that you think, right, I'm gonna have to perk up a bit here, and I'll stick on WITHNAIL and
I just think I think for me I love it, but as an actor I have watched Richard E. Grant's monologue quite a lot, because I just think how he manages to display so much emotion and while reciting that monologue as well, it's just it's heartbreakingly perfect. It's one of those most perfect moments of cinema I think I've ever seen, actually. So wonderful. Right, so we better get on to the last one, but definitely not least, and it's somewhat actually another Tom recommended this as one of his top 3 films, and it just blew me away. Like AFTERSUN, it just like incredible, very recent film, one that I've already bought on DVD. But why? I mean, I hate asking this, but why did you select AFTERSUN?
Again, it's one of those things where I watched it the first time, really thought it was a really great piece of filmmaking, really great performances. And then I watched it the second time and it kind of blew me away. It's one of those where, you know, I think there's an added layer to it. It does what it means to in the first time anyway, but you know, you can always kind of go back and look and you pick up more kind of subtleties and nuances to the performances and also how the film is constructed.
Yes.
Because I think, you know, I saw an interview with Charlotte Wells where the process of writing it took years, like I think 7 years or something like that.
Wow.
And initially she was kind of like, when she was writing it, she kind of got caught up in trying to fit narrative, kind of like, you know, 3-act structure,
Yeah.
having
Okay.
a like beginning, middle, and end, and some kind of, you know, through line. But I think, you know, the more she kind of went back to rewriting it, the more she kind of decided that it had to be more of a character piece rather than plot driven, and she would focus on these kind of like key moments. So, you know, it's not like a formulaic story of in any way. And there's these moments with, you know, this dad and his young daughter effectively on their last holiday together. And it's, you know, just her kind of reconciling her vision of her father in, you know, in that holiday, and trying to recognize something that she didn't really spot when she was younger, before she could really understand it. But it just, again, a bit like with Nell and I, it's just sort of, you know, they go off on holiday. You know,
Yeah.
these standard kind of things happen. I think actually one thing that I think she did really well was capture the kind of the essence of being away in like a package holiday somewhere in
Yeah.
like Mallorca, I think it was, it's set.
Yeah.
That kind of brought back a few, you know, rang a few bells with me anyway.
Really did, like her, because
Yeah.
it's a coming of age story in so many ways, like a double coming of age
Yeah.
story. And it's yeah, just that nostalgia and just that, oh, it's a phenomenal, like I say, it's one of those things. As soon as I watched it, I was like, I'm gonna have to watch that again, but I just need a minute.
It's definitely, yeah, you need a bit of a space to go back to it. Yeah, because I
And you
think I had like 6 months or so and I thought I need to watch this again.
But yeah, but
um
two things you mentioned already about strange camera work, and it's not done for the sake of doing it and trying to be arty, but so many just filming off surfaces to seeing the reflections of people. So it is like a memory.
yeah.
Exactly is what, and the soundtrack. I will never listen to Under Pressure in the same way again.
Oh,
Yeah,
definitely not, no.
oh my word! But just,
Incredible.
yeah, just what they've done, and like Charlotte Webb saying that she always had certain songs in mind and used in those ways as well, altered in those ways. Just a complete knitting together of like music and visual and the performances as well. It's, oh, it's a, oh, it makes
Yeah.
me speak in noises. It's so good.
But I think, you know, it's just so relatable. Everyone can kind of relate to aspects of it with Callum, the lead character. I
Yes.
think, you know, everyone's kind of been through that sort of depression, but you know, maybe not necessarily the same kind of level as him, but you can kind of relate to that feeling of, you know, sometimes you're trying to put a brave face on, you're trying to like lift yourself up and sort of be kind of energetic. I mean,
Mm,
I think it hit me as well because that the age he was, that was the kind of age that I felt kind of similar feelings as well.
mm,
Um, where you're just not quite sure where you're going, what you're doing. And obviously he had the added thing of being a father at the time. I think I became a father a bit later, which I think by that time I'd kind of settled in myself
figured
a bit
out.
more, so which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
good. But again, I kind of vibe with that aspect of it, the father-daughter relationship as well. I
yeah.
mean, it can, you know, so, you know, there's some days where you might be down, but you kind of got to you raise your game, I guess, or put on a brave face and kind of be, you know, go out scuba diving or whatever, or playing pool, and you've kind of got to try and get in the moment. It's like he forces himself as well. And then, you know, what Charlotte Wells did really well is so much of what we get, you know, in terms of information is given visually. So it might
Yes.
be things you pick up like on the mise en scène with you'll see like, you know, Tai Chi books and he's doing Tai Chi, trying to sort of, you know, relax himself. It's just these so many moments in it. Moments that obviously maybe she's thinking back to in her memory and thinking, oh, she gets a newfound appreciation for it.
Yes.
But I think you don't see a great deal of the girl as an adult. Just, I mean, she's got quite a small but sort of prominent, powerful role in that when she's looking back. But you get enough to feel that she's starting to feel similar things that her dad did. So she's starting to really kind of understand what he was going through a bit more.
I think the one thing that really stuck with me, and I've heard a different interpretation from it, and and that's a lovely thing about films as
Yeah,
well, when they don't tell you how to feel. You can, I think this, but someone else thinks that, and brilliant. But the rug, the whole thing of the rug, when he buys it, and it's like, oh, can he afford it? And he's, so I took it to be almost that it was a symbol of his depression, and he couldn't escape from it. And even though it was weighing him down, he still wanted it. And at the end, you see, or close to the end, you see her putting, as an adult, putting her feet into it. So it's got her as well. That's bleak, Phil. Someone said,
yeah,
like, he, even though he couldn't afford it, he wanted to buy this memory, and she still has that memory of him. So he's still with her in a way, like
yeah,
comforting her in her bleak moments, which maybe says more about me. But like, it just, yeah, just little things like that, like you say, where you pick up on it, but then again, as we've said with the other two films as well, which make them so classic, is you're not told how to feel. This is just something that's being relayed to you. Now you take from it what you wish.
yeah, exactly. I think going back to even like the first time we spoke and I mentioned Stalker and films like
Yeah.
that, Mirror's got a few similarities because it's a film about memories and, you know, how they kind of change over the years or how they get kind of affected by maybe, you know, dreams and sort of fantasies as well, where you kind of manipulate those memories. But, you know, Tarkovsky always did like to have films that you felt. So he did cinema about feeling more than, you know, a complex narrative or plot twists and things like that. I
Mm,
think one thing I really sort of, others might have felt this. I felt this a little bit too when I first watched Aftersun. There's almost this sense of like an impending doom.
yeah.
You almost expect, because maybe you're like being driven by, you know, preconceived expectations of, you know, cinema that you've watched before, but you almost feel like it's building up to something like a dark moment or some kind of,
Mm,
you know, horrible moment. But it kind of doesn't go that conventional route. But I just think in terms of what the film is about and how well it conveys that message, it's just really powerful. Definitely
it's,
a film that, you know, will really hit a lot of people. I mean, I've known people that thought, you know, they've found it odd in the sense that, you know, it's not conventional in any way,
yeah.
um, but it really kind of sticks with you.
And the acting as well is
Yeah,
impeccable. Paul Mescal is just like, just that sense it's not acting. It
yeah,
really doesn't feel like acting. It's like you feel like on some bits I felt weird. It felt like I shouldn't be listening to this young girl talking about love or her thoughts, or hearing about Callum talking about his depression, or like trying to make it right for his daughter. It felt so personal and so just so fragile. It was, oh, it's tough. It's an incredible film, but also tough to watch. Not for the obvious depressing way, just because it feels so personal. That's probably where the
yeah.
seven
I mean,
years
there's
writing the
almost a,
script
you know,
comes in.
voyeuristic aspect to it, isn't
Yes,
there? Yeah,
very much so. And the fact you're watching, for all intents and purposes, some of it personal home videos. The fact that the whole film pretty much starts on a rewind. You're like,
yeah,
oh, this is okay. We're going back, which again adds to the point. Well, why are we going back? What's
yeah.
happened? What's happened that we can only go back? And
And that initial part of the video, it kind of repeats as the film goes on. And
yes,
sometimes you see a bit more, sometimes your perception of it starts to change the more you see it throughout the film as well.
yeah,
I just think, yeah, just really brilliant piece of filmmaking. all round. And then, you know, Frankie Corio as well, for someone so young. Absolutely amazing performance.
My God. And so much of her bit was ad-libbed apparently as well, like the whole mind camera bit and stuff as well. She was just like, I'm like, look at you, look at you. And I'll stop acting now. I'm done. Listen, mate, it's been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've got to get away today, but I really appreciate you spending the time again. We've done the hour. So we've got the film coming out, or you've got the film coming out soon. Is there anywhere else where people can follow you, and anything else coming out soon that you'd like me to mention or like people to know about?
Yeah, so The Baby in the Basket, we're in post. Hopefully we'll have trailers and things a bit later on next year. And
Well, it could be this year, 2024, people.
yeah. Oh yeah. If it's 2024, yeah. I think release optimistically end of 2024, but maybe early 2025. And then just, you know, producing more, writing more. And I'm sure there'll be a few more releases coming out as well.
Excellent. Keep pushing forward, mate. Keep creating, and like I say, keep coming out with those authentic and unique voices as well.
I'll give it my best shot anyway.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Well, listen, mate, thank you so much. Even though it will probably be retroactive now. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Yeah,
and
same to you, mate.
And I'll see you again soon, all right?
Yeah.
All the best.
See you later,
Take care.
Mate. Thanks.